Hi, my name is Nina. Today I'm going to tell you all my testimony. This is something that I feel in my heart and in my spirit that I need to do. Before I start my testimony, I just want to let everyone know that this video is not just for believers. Really, this video, I'm aiming to target those who aren't believers, for women, young women, girls who have been in the shoes that I've been in and who are in the shoes that I have been in. And for those who don't, for those who don't believe in God, for those that don't understand God, who don't understand the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, because I too was in that same boat. I didn't fully grasp all of that until, the past 3 years. I was born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia. My mother and my father weren't married very long. They got divorced when I was around 3.5 years old. I don't remember the process or anything, but I do know that they got divorced when I was at a very young age. So the process of divorce I don't think was too painful for me. I lived with my dad. I lived with my dad growing up. I guess you could say that I lived in a house that was Christian, a Christian background. We went to church almost every Sunday. My dad was in the choir. I eventually got into the choir. My former stepmom at that time, she would always sing Christian-based, like hymn type songs. She would pray with us. And so there was a little bit of a Christian background, I could say, in my earlier years. So my dad and my former stepmother, they were married up until I was I was in 8th grade when they separated. I think I was in 8th grade or just beginning 9th grade. So I was probably 13 years old, 12 or 13. And while he was married to her, they had 2 daughters. So I have 2 sisters, both younger than me, obviously. And also, I wanted to mention that while they were married, there was a good bit of violence in that house. There were several times where I would hear and catch both of them fighting and yelling. My dad I just remember him punching a door one time. It was really loud, and I, being the older siblings, trying to protect my sister, or both of my sisters. I don't remember if my youngest sister was there when all of this was happening, but I know that my middle sister was there, and I would try to protect her from hearing those things. So growing up in that house wasn't always pleasant. And I know for me, I definitely I wasn't too happy being in that house all the time, so a lot of my time was spent outside and with friends. But my dad, he met my stepmom now, and during that transition of him leaving my former stepmom and meeting my present stepmother, he and I spent more time together because I guess he was just trying to figure things out and where we were going to live and all of that jazz. So I started to feel a lot closer to my dad, and I felt like, my dad were kicking it. So when he met my stepmom today, I wasn't too happy about it. I felt threatened. I felt like she was taking my dad away from me. We eventually lived in an apartment with her and her 3 boys. So I also have 3 stepbrothers. They're younger than me as well. So I'm the oldest of 6 children. But we ended up living with her and my brothers, and then we moved to another house, and then we eventually moved to the house that they still live in now, my dad and my stepmom. Meanwhile, during all of this, they ended up going to elope. They got married, and then they had a ceremony that all of the children were involved in. It took me a little bit to open up to her and to befriend my stepmom, but through the years, I grew close to her. We grew close, and we formed a friendship and a bond that was pretty awesome. I definitely looked at her like a friend, and she taught me a lot of things. She taught me how to cook, how to clean, how to take care of a man, how to basically be submissive to a husband. And I commend her for all of that. I appreciate all of that she's done. But when we moved to that house that they still live in, I felt very alone and trapped because my dad and my stepmom, when they first met, I'd say for the first few years of their marriage, it seemed like they locked themselves in the room a lot of the times, and they weren't as involved with the children. I felt like I definitely lost my dad at that point. I felt like I wasn't heard, and he didn't really care much about my feelings or my opinions or my thoughts. I just felt like I was being controlled in every aspect of my life. He sheltered me a lot. Definitely from a certain age, I'd say 15, around 15 years old, 14, 15. I was sheltered, and I didn't have a lot of friends because of that. I couldn't keep friends. He wouldn't allow me to participate in a sport that I wanted to be in. He wouldn't allow me to do the things that other teenage kids were doing, kids my age were doing at that time, hanging out, spending the night with friends, going to the mall, going to the movies. I was stuck at home, and I felt like I was in prison. Anytime that I tried to voice my opinion or really say anything that came from my heart or that I thought should be voiced, it just got shut down, and I felt like I couldn't talk. Again, I felt like I couldn't be heard. So I just felt really alone. Several times I thought about running away. I thought about leaving, but I had nowhere to go. We were so far back out into the country, nobody lived around me. Prom was coming up, and my dad and my stepmom introduced me to a guy who was 6 years older than me to be my prom date. I was 17, and I think he was 23, 18, 19, 20, 23, yeah. He was about 23 years old. So we met, we started hanging out, and then it turned into we started dating. When I was younger, I don't remember how old I was, I promised my dad that I would not have sex until I was 18 years old. I promised him that, and I didn't know that he took it so literally. So long story short, that guy and I, we had sex, and I told my dad. Somehow he convinced me to tell him what happened. He had a very good way at manipulating and getting me to say things. that I didn't necessarily want to tell him. It's almost like he knew. So I told my dad, and my dad said that he was old-fashioned. So he convinced me to convince the guy to marry me, and basically said if I didn't marry him, that I would never see him again. So I convinced the guy to marry me. We got married at the court, and we weren't married long. I started cheating on him when we were less than a year into our marriage. I started cheating on him with different people that he knew and people that I knew from high school. It's just like I went crazy. He was my ticket out of my dad's house, so I really just wanted to leave. I didn't really love my ex-husband at that time. I just wanted to get out of my dad's house. So after I left his house, I just went haywire, basically. So while being married to this guy, I was also introduced to alcohol. I went to his family's parties and like his friends' parties, and they had alcohol there, and even though I was underage, I still drank. And that was the beginning of my toxic relationship with alcohol. I liked the way that it made me feel. It was very numbing, and I guess all of the anxiety and depression that I had felt living at my dad's, it was all canceled out when I started to drink. I felt happy when I drank. I felt numb when I drank, and it just made me feel good all around. So alcohol did make me feel very secure. I'm gonna rewind for a second. I forgot to mention something. While I was living with my dad, I visited my mom every other weekend. That was what the court ordered. And every time I visited her, I knew that our time was precious. I knew that we didn't have much time together. It was literally like maybe 2 days total, maybe 2.5 days. And it was very sad for me at the same time because I knew we didn't have much time together. As I got older, I spent less and less time with my mom. For some odd reason, I happen to believe that, and from what she has told me, that my dad was a part of it. So I just wanted to throw that in there. It was a little traumatizing, or actually a lot traumatizing, that I didn't get to see my mom as much as I should have. That my mom wasn't as part of my life as I would like her to be, and that she should have been. And all of it wasn't her fault. So back to the alcohol. I fell in love with alcohol while I was married to my ex-husband. I was cheating on him. He found out, I'd say in the middle of our marriage, and we tried to work things out, but I went back to cheating on him. I was just very unhappy. We ended up living with my grandmother at one point, my grandparents, and I had a talk with her the night before that I told him I couldn't do it anymore. We needed to get a divorce because it was just hurting him, and I was tired of hurting him. And she just told me flat out I needed to tell him and let him go and let him be free. So I made him breakfast, and after he finished eating, I told him what needed to be done and that we just needed to get a divorce. So he left, and I was working at the airport at the time at one of their like kiosk stores, and there was a guy that I met there. Actually, he met me. I was not interested in finding another boyfriend, or I was not looking for another relationship, but I found him, and no, I didn't find him. He came to me, and we started talking, and because I was so miserable living at my grandparents because there's nothing there, I had no friends there, I wanted another escape. I wanted to find someone to live with, and so I asked him if I could move in with him, and he said sure. So eventually we started dating. I did not love the guy. I just wanted to not have to live with my grandparents. So we were dating for about 3 years. He taught me a lot too. He was older than me. I think he was in his 30s, and he just knew a lot about life. He knew a lot about how to navigate life, and he also knew how to manipulate people, so I did learn some things from him on that spectrum. But while I was dating him, I also met another guy. I was working at a restaurant, and I met this young guy. He's about 4 years younger than me at the time, or he is 4 years younger than me. He was 19, I was about 22, 23 years old, and I really, really liked him. I really liked him. He was totally different than the norm or any other guy I had been with. He was just very open to a lot of things, and he wasn't afraid to try things out. And so, long story short, I ended up breaking up with the guy that I was with, and I moved in with the new guy. So as you can see, there was like a cycle here. There had been a cycle. I left one guy and started dating another guy, and there's cheating going on. And so, back up again, while I was dating the second guy, I was also introduced to weed, or what a lot of people say, marijuana. And I started abusing that while at the same time drinking. I was also introduced to strip clubs. I don't know, I thought it was pretty interesting to see the women there make money the way that they did. So I didn't really think too much about it at the time, but it was cool. It was a cool hangout place. So when I started living with the third guy, he and I were working at the same restaurant. It was family owned. His aunt and uncle owned that place, and they allowed their employees to drink. So we drank a lot. We took a lot of shots. And that's when things, I think, started to really get dark for me, because not only was I drinking just about every day, but I felt like while I worked there and while I was dating him, I was exposed to a lot of darkness and just evilness. Not to say that he was evil or like his family was evil, but it was just the atmosphere that I was always surrounded by started to get to me. I started experiencing blackouts. I started experiencing panic attacks, and the guy that I was dating at the time, he was controlling and manipulative, but he was very insecure, and he just made me feel like I couldn't leave him or his world would be shattered. And to me, that was like devastating. I didn't want to hurt anybody. I never wanted to hurt anybody. I was just trying to live. I was trying to figure out who I was and what life was all about for me, what my life was going to be. So they had parties there for different events, for like UFC parties. They had Halloween parties. I met this girl while I was working there, and I wouldn't say I was struggling to make money, but I definitely wanted to make more money. I wanted to travel. I wanted to buy things that I wanted. I just wanted to enjoy life. And so the money that I was making at the restaurant just wasn't enough. It covered rent and the food that I ate, and that's it. So I met this girl while I was there, and she was very nice. I found out where she worked, and I thought, okay, cool. I've been to strip clubs before. Like, that's pretty cool. She's really nice. Never talked to a dancer before. And then I told my boyfriend at the time, and he thought it was pretty awesome. He thought, I guess in his mind, that I could just make money from there and we could do all the things we wanted to do. We can buy the things we want to buy. And I started to think the same thing. Like, okay, cool, I can do that. So he started to tell me to talk to her and see if I could get in, and started to put all these things in my mind, like, oh, you see how much money she makes, and wouldn't it be so great? And again, I thought it was a great idea. So eventually I talked to her and asked her if she could get me into the place that she was working at, and I had to do an audition. I walked into the club, it was a strip club. I walked into the club and the lady looked at me and she said, okay, come back on this day and you're gonna have to do an audition. Bring some black high heels and either bring a bathing suit or lingerie or whatever, because that's what you're gonna be wearing. I said, okay. I did not know that I was gonna be auditioning like live time while they're open and there are customers in the building. So I auditioned, and I was pretty nervous, but I was also very excited because I just knew that I would get the job because I thought I was the best dancer ever. And I did get the job. And so I was able to create the schedule that I wanted. I only had to work a few days a week. It was mandatory to work at least a few days a week, and the rest of the week you could do whatever. So I got the job. When I started that job, I think that's definitely when things took a turn for the worse. I met a lot of people working there. I met all kinds of people with different fetishes, people who came there for the wrong reasons. When I first started dancing, I was very pure in my motives, meaning I did not do any extracurricular activities other than just dancing. And when I saw and when I learned how the other girls were making more money, I thought that that would be the best thing to do, because then I could definitely make the money that I wanted to make. So they have these rooms in the back, private rooms. I honestly forgot what they're called. And honestly, this is the first time that I actually have talked about it like this in a very long time. So forgive me if I can't remember everything. I have blocked a lot of things from my mind. The private rooms you could take, or the customer would, I guess, pick out the girl they wanted to take back into the private room, and you could spend alone time. I'm just jumping all over the place, sorry. Let me start with this. I met a couple of regulars while working there. One of them was a really nice guy, older gentleman, a lot older. Actually, both of them, a lot older than me, but they were kind. They weren't very demanding, but they definitely knew how to manipulate the situation and getting what they wanted. They would take me back to the back room. One of them, I never had sex in these rooms, but I definitely did some extracurricular activities in these rooms to make more money, but also to keep them happy so they would come back to see me. And then the blackouts started again while working there, because when you work there, you can drink as much as you want. Customers buy you all the drinks you could have. It's like a never-ending flow of alcohol. And so I was experiencing blackouts. I remember at one point I was in one of those back rooms with a customer I'd never met, and all of a sudden I blacked out. I fell on the floor. And these are things that I can remember because at different points in the blackout, I came to. And I had to crawl to the front of this establishment to try and get help because the guy that was with me I don't think he was really helping me. Like, I feel like he was trying to take advantage of the situation, and I got sent to the hospital. I would go to different parties with the friends that I made there. I had 2 friends while working there, and we would go to parties. We would go to bars and whatever and drink, and I'd have blackouts while I was out with them. I remember this one time, me and this friend, we went to a bar, and she said that when we got back to my place, we were outside on the patio, we were talking. Meanwhile, we were high and we were drinking, and she said, I just did not look like myself. And I said something, and I swiftly went inside the apartment, like the fastest she had ever seen. And at this point, I think I was starting to experience demonic possession. So I was going at a downward spiral after working there for a total of 2 years, I think. 2 years. In between those 2 years, I did take a break. I started working with a florist, and it was cool, but after about 6 months of working with her, I wasn't making the money that I thought I needed to make, and I went back to working at the club. And the last several months of working at the club, I was a mess. I was a wreck. I was starting to experience sleep paralysis. The devil would torment me in my sleep. And if you don't know what sleep paralysis is, it's like you're half awake, but you're still asleep. And you can see what's going on outside of your sleeping, if that makes sense. So I could see demons. I could see claws coming at me and getting closer and closer almost every single time that I was having sleep paralysis. There were times where I would black out, and at one point I tried to throw myself out of the window, banging up against the window, trying to break the window and I guess throw myself out of the window. I would have convulsions, like I'm on the floor and having a seizure, but it wasn't an actual seizure. It was literally like I was possessed. And I got sent to the hospital again at one point. Meanwhile, during, I'd say, the halfway point of while I was working at the club, I met someone super awesome. He and we decided to get rid of our people that we were with, and so we moved in together, and so he knew that I was dancing. He knew that I went on dates with these guys, which I didn't mention, but I did go on dates with a couple of my customers to make extra money outside of the club. And so he knew what was going on, and he was there while I was going through these possessed moments. So still to this day, I call him my angel. I literally feel like God sent him into my life to help me in some way. At some point, I think he had had enough of seeing me go through all that I was going through, and so he told me that, if I didn't change, that we were going to have to change and we would not be able to be together, because he was over all of that. After I quit working at the club, after I stopped working there, I decided to go back, and my intention going there was just to hang out for a little bit, have a couple drinks, and then go back home. That's not what happened. I was there, I saw one of my old customers, and after only having a couple of drinks, I blacked out. And my friend who worked there at the time, she knew that I wasn't able to drive home, and so she convinced one of the managers to allow her to take me home. She told me to stay put somewhere, and I didn't listen. And everything that I'm about to tell you from this point on, up until I get to jail, I'm telling you from what she told me and what the police report said, and from things that I remember, sporadic things, because I was blacked out for the majority of the time. She said that I found my keys and I left the parking lot. I do remember why I left was to get home, because I didn't want my boyfriend at the time to get mad. I knew that I was there for far too long, and so I was trying to get home. I left without my purse and without my phone. So I do remember getting out of my car on the side of the highway. I do remember that I was looking for my purse, I was looking for my phone, and I guess there was someone following behind me who called the police, and I remember getting thrown on the ground, I guess because I wasn't cooperating, that's my thought. But on the police report, and something that I do remember saying was, "Jesus, help me." I was calling out for Jesus. I was desperate. I think my soul was desperate at that time, and so I got hauled off to the criminal section of the hospital so they could check me and make sure I was okay to go to jail. And then I eventually went to jail, and being there for 24 hours was very eye-opening and scary. You're with people you don't know, people who have committed serious crimes. You're just all gathered in this one congregational area. And you wait to see if you are going to stay in jail, or if someone has bailed you out. So my boyfriend, which is my husband, he bailed me out. I remember walking out of there feeling very ashamed and very unhappy with myself, very disappointed in my actions and who I had become at that point. I don't remember if it was, I think it was after that day. So this was 2013. After that day, I had a dream. And the dream was, I was hanging out with some friends. We were about to get back into one of my friends' Jeeps, or like an SUV. And before I got in the car, my phone started ringing. I looked at my phone and it said Jesus calling. And so I hung up the phone and I proceeded to get into the car. And again, my phone started ringing and it said Jesus calling. And I just kept thinking, I don't know anyone named Jesus. Who is calling me? So I hung up my phone again. And out of the clear blue, and I to this day remember it so clearly, a voice, a very loud voice said, "Call me." And while the voice was saying that, I could feel like shaking around. It almost felt like the bed was shaking, but the bed wasn't shaking. And then I just woke up, and I was like, what? Was that real? Like, did I really hear God talking to me? It was a voice that I never heard before, but I knew it was God. I knew it wasn't anything to fear. So I told my mom about the dream, and I started praying. I hadn't prayed in years. I hadn't said God's name in years. I haven't looked to Jesus in years. I haven't read the Bible in years. I don't even think I ever read the Bible. I started reading the Bible here and there. I started seeking out ways to learn how to become a Christian. I was still drinking. I was still into the bar scene and partying, but I was still trying to find my way to the light. So I ended up going into AA. I went to several AA meetings, and I think AA did help me, most definitely. Helped me see things a lot clearer. But eventually I fell out of that AA scene, and I started to go to church. I went to church and I got baptized again. I rededicated my life to the Lord. I was still drinking, not as heavily as I was, but I was still drinking. And from that point on, I'd say around 2015 is when I really started to get serious in my walk with the Lord. And that just goes to show, that you don't just change overnight. Some people do, and some people it just takes time, and the Lord wants to take His time healing you, and that's what it's taken for me. Throughout the years, I have dropped a lot of things from my life. Old friends from that time, that dark time in my life. I no longer drink. I don't know how long it's been since last time I had a drink, but I no longer drink. I no longer listen to the music that I listen to. I see things differently, and I hear things differently, and my perspective is a lot clearer. The Lord literally rescued me and pulled me out of the darkness. As I get closer and closer in my walk with the Lord and my relationship with Jesus, things change. The way that I am today is completely different than how I was a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And 2016, my husband and I got married, and he's been so patient with me throughout these years. We even, before we got married, because I was getting closer to the Lord in my relationship with Him, we took several months to be celibate. I think it was about 9 months we were celibate. We were still living with each other because I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to go, and I didn't want to leave him. So about 9 months, we had no sexual interaction with each other. I tried to be careful with making sure he didn't see me naked or see me in a certain way. So it has taken time to get to where I am today, and I'm still learning, I'm still growing. And this is why my channel has changed a lot. For those of you who have been following me from the beginning, for those of you who are new to my channel, this is the first time you've ever watched a video of mine. If you take a look back at all of my old videos, which I thought I was going to delete, but I think I'm going to keep up for a while, you can see the change. And I started this channel to give me an outlet to do something creative, because I am a creative person. I started this channel to heal, to get my mind off of all of those things, to get my mind off of drinking, to get my mind off of dancing and all of the things from the past. And you can see how I've evolved. And that's what happens when you finally surrender and you let go and you allow the Lord to work in your life. You change. Material things don't matter. Makeup doesn't matter. Hair stuff doesn't matter. Clothes don't matter. Jewelry doesn't matter. Things don't matter. All that matters is where your heart is and where you're going to end up when you die, when you're no longer on this earth. Sorry if it looks a little bit different. This is raw. This is very raw. I had to switch cameras because my card on the other camera is full. But what I wanted to say was to waste your life on all of the things that the world has to offer, which is, makeup and clothes and all of the things, all of the material things, all of the glitz and glamour, is just, from experience, it's a waste of a good life that God has given each of us to decide, of course, have free will and decide what we choose to do with it. But I'm here to tell you that God loves you, and He wants the best for you. He wants the best for all of us. But if we can put aside all of our wants and our desires that are not of Him, what do you have to lose but to gain a better life, to gain better understanding, better wisdom by His Holy Spirit? Life has just started for me, like the beginning of a good life. And even though it's been a good 3 years of solely walking with the Lord, it's only the beginning, and it's only going to get better. My heart has truly been restored and renewed. My thoughts have been restored and renewed. The way that I treat people is completely different. The way that my husband and I communicate has definitely changed and evolved for the better, and it's only going to get better from here. So I thank you all for watching this long testimony. I know that it was lengthy, and I try to keep it short, sweet, and simple, but there's a lot of in-betweens there. And one thing that I do want to mention is, on top of the control and the manipulation and feeling like no one understood me at my dad's house, I forgot to mention that another big part of my life that led me to dancing and led me to the alcohol was the lack of relationship that I had with my mother. I truly feel in my heart that if I had a relationship with her while growing up, if I had more time with her while I was living with my dad, I would have learned a lot more from her and how to value my life and what to do with it, how to live it the way God would want me to. But everything happens for a reason, and I think this is part of God's plan. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope to see you soon.